Hello, everybody. I hope you guys are having a great weekend. It's the weekend before Valentine's Day, so we had a great thing in town where I live called Chocolate Fantasia, and all the businesses downtown make little chocolates and people buy a ticket and you go around and you collect the chocolate from each business, and it's super fun and you run into all your friends. But it is cold today and I am down in my basement. I've got my scarf, my coat, trying to keep warm. I don't want to bother with turning on the heat. But anyway, I wanted to just offer like a quick little fun activity you could do as a family or just for yourself, but this is great for kids too. Last week I painted a heart for my front door, and I just picked up this heart at Dollar Tree for, well, it's really $1.25 tree now. So for $1.25, I got this heart. It's made out of wood. It's pretty, it's pretty thin. It's got this cute little twine thing to hang it on. I'm trying to be able to show this to you well. And I painted it, and I just kind of like did an intuitive painting kind of thing where I was just like slapping the paint on, making shapes and designs. And so I had this idea like, oh, this would be so fun to do with kids, like over the weekend or maybe on Valentine's Day. We used to be homeschoolers, so this would be like a fun homeschool activity if you guys are homeschooling. If your kids are in school, you could do it after school, whatever. You could do it, today. If you don't have a Dollar Tree near you, or they're out of these hearts, because I know our Dollar Tree is like, there's no more hearts left. You could also just like cut a heart shape out of like some heavy paper or even poster board, which they do sell at Dollar Tree too, I think. And paint that, or have your kids paint that. And so you'll just need like something to paint. And if you don't even want to do hearts, you could do any shape really. And then I just have like this really cheap paint I get at Walmart. It's called Apple Barrel Craft Paint. You can get like all kinds of colors, whatever. I got like the big ones too if you want to just like invest in that. They're not that expensive, so. And then paint markers. I've got some Posca paint markers, but you could get some at Walmart or wherever, whatever store you have near you. There's different brands and stuff like that. You don't even really need paint markers because you could do everything with paint still too. And I think that's it. You want some paintbrushes, like get some cheap paintbrushes, especially if you're working with kids. My trusty water container, which, green chili dip, yay, New Mexico. Any kind of container will do. So that's it, I think, for supplies. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you the process because I filmed making my last heart, and I'm just going to talk you through it. So I hope you guys have fun and happy Valentine's Day. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing I like to do is get a little paint on my palette, and you can see I'm using the lid to some kind of Tupperware container, probably yogurt or something. I try to limit my colors to about 5 colors plus black and white, so 7 in total. And for this project, I use the Apple Barrel colors Pool Blue, Purple Iris, Bright Blue, Candy Pink, and Pumpkin Orange. I started out with just these 3 colors, and then I'm just going to kind of start putting them all over the surface. I think you just saw my hair blowing into the screenshot there. Sorry about that. I'm starting with the purple, and I'm just going to put the paint wherever I want to. So I actually did use 6 colors. I forgot I added in a neon yellow. I really like to use neon yellow because it glazes over the other colors and sort of transforms them. And you can pick any colors that you want to use. You don't have to go with the colors that I chose. And kids especially will probably want to pick their own. One thing to think about when you're doing a project like this is to pick colors that you know can mix well together. So I have the blue, the purple, and the pink, and I know that when I mix those together, I'm going to get different shades of purple, blue, and pink. So they go together well. Sometimes with kids, you'll get colors mixing that just turn everything brown. So you really want to kind of pay attention and help them out with that. So one of the things to think about too is the order of the colors. So you can see I put the purple and then the blue together, and if I had the orange on my palette right now and I mixed that into the purple or the blue, I'd probably get like a brownish gray kind of color that might not be something I really want. It kind of depends on what you're going for. And that will probably happen a little bit later on, but with the little kids, you really want to try to help them keep their colors looking the way that they want them to, instead of just having like one giant brown heart. So think about that too when you put your paints on the palette, especially for the kids, because they will just start mixing, everything all together. Now I've got this brush here. I think it's called a filbert. I'm not really great at the names for the brushes, but it's the one that's got sort of a rounded edge. I like to use it because it gives sort of a rounded petal shape when you paint with it. And I like to kind of do that in a big oval area. So we get sort of like these flower-esque petal shapes inside the paint. And I'm doing it while it's still wet so that the colors are kind of still blending together. This will also help sort of break up the purple and the blue. So I'm just put that pink, those couple of pink flowery shaped areas in. So I'm just going to keep kind of putting paint down onto the heart, using the couple of colors I have here and just sort of blending them together. You want to make sure you get all the way around those pieces of twine and get the paint colored in. It doesn't really matter right at this point, just kind of do whatever feels right. This is like the intuitive part. You're going to just start putting the paint down. Kids are great at this. They love it. If they want to start kind of making some more flower shapes in different spots, that's great too. Or maybe some other kind of shapes. Maybe they want to do something more geometrical, like triangles or squares or different shapes like that. I like to do a lot of floral stuff, so the flowers are sort of my go-to when I'm just kind of fooling around, having some fun. My daughter loves cats, so I can imagine she'd be drawing some cat-shaped pieces or, sections in there. She's kind of obsessed with cats. So just kind of, play around with the paint and get it on there. I'm going to go ahead and speed this part up, and I'll talk to you in just a minute. Okay, so now that we have our entire surface painted, and you can see I added in a few more flowery kind of shapes. There's one with the blue flower where I kind of left the middle purple underneath, so the purple was coming through. And I really did not expect to end up with kind of this stripy pattern going on from the left of the top left of the heart down diagonally to the right. And I wanted to kind of chop that up a little bit. And then I've got all this blue here. Um, and sometimes this happens because I just, when I go to pour out the paint, too much blue comes out, so you end up with extra blue. And, just go with it because it's just kind of part of the process. This is like process painting. We don't really have an end result in mind. We're just kind of putting the paint on there and seeing what will happen. So at this point, I've got some flower shapes sort of carved out in there. Now I've gone in and I've added some, I guess maybe they look kind of like little ovally, I don't know, stone shapes or something. And I'm just thinking about contrast. So I've got the light blue on top of the purple, and now I'm going in with some dark purple on top of the light blue, and I'm adding some more kind of flower shapes and those little, you know, round stone type shapes in. This will give it some texture and interest and kind of break up some of the color too, so I don't just have these big chunks of pink or purple or blue. This is always really fun for kids to do because they can just start painting right away, where there's really no planning and, you know, trying to make it look a certain way, and that's always fun. So now I'm going to go in with some orange, and this pumpkin orange looks really good with the candy pink color. It makes kind of a new color when they're together or even layered on top of each other, which I really like. So I'm going to kind of start doing some of that. And I also kind of like layering the orange over the blue in spots, as you'll see later on. It just sort of gives you an added dimension, and it'll darken up some spots and lighten up others. I haven't really waited for the paint to dry, but parts of it have dried. So you can see, like right now where I'm doing the orange over the blue, it's kind of just creating like a glaze over the blue. So you see the orange and then you can see the blue coming through underneath, but they're not really mixing together. But in some spots, they will mix a little bit because they're still wet. Right now I'm thinking about the orange kind of as an accent color. So I have these big chunks of purple, blue, and pink, and I'm kind of just going in and adding these little touches of orange. They give kind of like a little bright spot, and they break up the big chunks of color a little bit. You could be using any color to do this. It just depends on what you picked. And, you know, you can do anything you want, really. So now that we're kind of getting this orange in there and making some more kind of flower petal shapes, I think it's probably time to start with some new colors. So I'm going to add some white and some of that fluorescent yellow. These are acrylic paints that I've gotten, I think, at Walmart and maybe another craft store. I don't know for sure if the apple barrel has a neon yellow color, but I know they have neon orange, so they might. So you can probably get that there, and they definitely have white. So you don't really need like a more expensive brand of paint. But yeah, so then the white and the yellow and mixed with these colors are going to change them. The white is going to make them a little bit more pastel looking, and the yellow, when glazed on top of the other colors, will change them. So the blue may become more green. The orange is going to get a little bit more vibrant. And I'm using a smaller brush for this so I can go in and do like some more detail kind of stuff. This is a great project to do with kids because you can talk about the color wheel and how if you mix certain colors together, you get new colors. So, you know, purple's made by red and blue, and orange can be made by pink and red. We're using, you know, different colors, but when you put this yellow on top of the pink, you get kind of a different orangey color. And when you put this yellow on top of the blue, you get this kind of green, bright green color. The little kids really love mixing colors. It's magic to them. They get so excited about it when they can make a new color. And it's a really good lesson for kids, like a skill to learn. Most of this paint is pretty dry, so I'm just going to go ahead and take the yellow and paint over some of the other colors that I've already painted. So I have those kind of purple dots going on and the pink. And by painting this neon yellow over the top, I'm getting new colors underneath. And I really like using a thin layer. It gives it kind of a glaze so you can see the colors underneath. And I love layering the colors and just giving it some depth. It changes the texture, you know, and how it looks. It's really fun. The neon yellow is kind of a thin paint anyway, so it's not opaque, so it's called translucent, and you can see through it. And I just really love the way it changes the colors. So if you only have a few colors of paint, you can actually end up with even more just by using the right colors and mixing them together or glazing them on top of each other. So I'm putting the yellow wherever I feel like this little heart needs some yellow, and you can put yours wherever you want. It doesn't really matter. This is just like I was saying earlier, it's process. It's more about creating it than an end product. I have no idea what this is going to look like when I finish. Um, and I just sort of intuitively know where to stick certain colors. You will too. Trust your instincts. Let your hands just go where they want to go. And if for some reason you think your heart is starting to look really ugly or too chaotic, or just, you don't really like it, just keep going. I've found that in most of my paintings, when I'm working this way, there is a point where I just think, what is happening? This looks terrible. And I would say at least like 95 to 99% of the time, once I've finish it, it all comes together. And yours will too. So don't get nervous if it starts looking a little wonky or chaotic, or you don't like some of the colors. You can always let it dry a little bit and then paint over the parts you don't like. That's what's so great about acrylic paint. It dries really fast and you can fix things. Okay, so at this point I've decided I need a little bit darker spots. I want to go really dark, and I'm going to use some of the bright blue. And I really like the bright blue because if you water it down, it can be kind of more translucent, and if you use it full strength without watering it down, it's a little bit thicker and it's nice and dark. And when you paint this blue over the purple, you get an even darker color, which is pretty close to black, but not quite. I'm thinking about my flower shapes, and I want them to stand out, so part of what I'm doing now is going around the shapes a little bit with some of this blue just to kind of make them stand out better. If you've done something besides flowers, or if you see something besides flowers, because part of it is just looking at the paint you have on your heart and figuring out, what do you see in it? Do you see flowers? Do you see a tree? Do you see a cat? What are you seeing in it? And then kind of starting to develop that shape a little bit more. You can outline it a little bit with something darker or paint around it. I'm also adding like some dark into this light blue over here, and maybe it'll turn into another flower shape. I'm not sure yet. I'm just kind of winging it. So just kind of see what happens. Once I get a few things kind of outlined a little bit or painted around where I can see the flower shapes a little bit more, I'm going to go back in and kind of do some dots with the blue and this smaller paintbrush. So it's just a little bit different than those big ovally stone shapes I was making before. And this is just like another layer. And I might paint some of these dots like right over a flower shape that I see, or I might do it around the flower. It just kind of depends. Just kind of looking at it and thinking, what does it need in this area? What does it need in that area? And if I feel like it needs something a little bit dark, I'm going to do some of these dark blue dots. It just makes it have that layer, so you have those different colors coming through. You'll notice sometimes I rinse my brush off in the water. I do this especially if I'm going to go from two different colors that I really don't want mixing at all. Sometimes I'll just wipe off some of the excess paint into a paper towel too and just kind of keep going, and then letting some of the old color that was on my brush sort of fade through. Here I've mixed some of the orange and the white so I can get kind of this peachy white color. I like to do this because it adds some lighter spots, but it's not completely white, so that I can go back in later with either a white paint pen or white paint with a small brush and do some detail work. Okay, so I'm going to do some of that now with just the white. And you'll notice too that when I paint, I do tend to kind of bounce around between the colors. So I might be using white right now, and then I might go back to the peachy color. I might go back to just orange. It just kind of depends because it's, like I said, it's just a process of just seeing what feels right next and then doing it. So I decided to make an actual flower shape. So I'm painting the petals, like the outline of the petals for a flower that I want. The other flowers are a little bit more abstract looking. So I wanted to go in and just sort of add something that you can tell is definitely supposed to be a flower. And I'm just going to go ahead and color that in white and leave some of the blue kind of coming through, and that sort of helps give the flower like more dimension. One of the things I like to do is to water down the white paint, and I've done that here, and this gives it sort of a glaze so you can see through the white more. I outlined the flower with thick white paint, and then I'm kind of filling in the petals with a more watered down white, and the paint just sort of floats around in the water, and when it finally dries, I think it gives it a little bit of a watercolor effect, which is kind of cool. I think it probably is more noticeable when you're actually painting on paper. The wood is a little bit more textured, and so it's a little bit different. You'll notice that when if you're painting on wood too, it just like the lines aren't going to be quite as smooth as they would be on paper. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up just a little bit. You can see that I did some flowers, and now I'm just going to add some white dots in different spots and white circles. Again, I just really like layering the paint and seeing the different colors come through. It's really fun to draw a circle around, something that's going to be partially pink and partially blue. And then once that's done, I decided that my shape over here really looks pretty much like a flower. So I'm going to go back in with some yellow. I just kind of want to make it stand out a little bit more. And the yellow on top of the pink kind of gives it some highlights and changes the colors a little bit so it's not all just one kind of flat pink. Okay, so I'm just going to keep doing that. And once this part's done, I'm going to move on to adding some black. I really like to use black. It brings out the color sometimes. It's just kind of fun. I don't know. I guess it's kind of like breaking a rule because in a lot of art schools they say like don't use black. You should just make your own black, mixing colors, or a dark, really dark color that's not completely black. But for some reason I just really like using black. I think it's fun, and it brings out the really bright colors. I'm gonna go in and do another shape that I really like to make, which is just little V's. Sometimes they look like little birds. You know how kids would make birds for their papers, and they just kind of put V's in the sky. It's kind of like that. But it's just another way to add a layer on top of all the other layers, which I just enjoy. It's fun, and I think it gives it more personality and interest. So I'm just going to go in and do that in some spots. I'm doing it on top of the darker colors right now. But eventually I'm sure I'll do some on top of the light colors too, because that's just the way I like to do things. And you can make any shapes you want. You might want to do like hashtags or circles or little triangles or whatever you can think of, zigzag lines. You can't do this the wrong way. Just let yourself be kind of in the zone, and your hand just goes where it wants to, and you don't think too hard about it, and just kind of make some shapes. You can make some bigger shapes, you can make some smaller shapes. All of that will add dimension and interest to your piece, and it's really fun, and the kids love it. They can do this without even thinking about it. Like, they don't stress or worry at all. It's so cool to watch. It's inspiring too. If you're someone that really wants to control things, paint with some kids. They're fearless. They don't worry at all about making a mistake or doing it wrong. They just dive right in. It's really cool. So I hope you can do that too and just let yourself have fun. Be a kid at heart. Don't worry. You can't do this wrong. It's just really fun. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up just a little bit so you can get the idea, but I don't think you need to see like every single brush stroke. And hopefully yours is going to look completely different from mine, but also really cool. So I feel like I have enough black for now. I'm going to go back into the orange and add a little bit of the fluorescent yellow just to make a new orange. Something just slightly brighter and a little bit lighter. And I'm going to go in and do some more layering. If you can, I don't know if you can see this very well, but I'm just kind of making some leaf shapes. I think you'll be able to see them better when I get into another spot. Just a real simple leaf shape, just to add some layers and interest and just something different. You can have your kids attempt to do this. It's pretty simple. It's kind of like a fish shape with like a little tail. It would be really cool actually to do a fish themed Valentine's Day heart. I could see some boys getting into that. So I'm just kind of adding them wherever I feel like it. I'm just gonna do it. Now I'm not gonna think about it too much. So I hope you could do the same. Just add some leaves or another shape. Maybe leaves aren't your thing, and that's fine too. Now I'm making some little tiny, like a rainbow shape or a little mountain, like a little hill. And I like to kind of stack them up. And it's kind of fun too because you go over the top of some different colors and then you get these little tiny mountains that have a little bit of orange and a little bit of blue. And they look cool. And again, it adds like another texture and another shape and just gives it some interest. And it'll take, away some of the blue if I'm feeling like there's just too much blue, so it breaks it up a little bit, changes what it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up again a little bit. It takes me a few minutes to do all these little mountain shapes. You can see I'm doing them right over the top of some of my other designs, so my little black dots are kind of getting covered up a little bit with them, or just another layer, so they're not disappearing so much, but they're still there, but they're just becoming part of a different design, and it just gives it another layer. At this point, I'm pretty happy with the way my design looks, and what I'm going to do now is just let it dry for a little while. I actually just put this outside in the sun, in the wind, and let it dry for 10 minutes or so and make sure that the paints aren't wet anymore. And then I'm going to go back in with my Posca pens and really define some of the shapes. You can see here I'm really picking out this flower and I'm outlining it with black. You could outline it with any color you'd like. White would work really well, even a dark blue or a pink. The Posca pens are really great at going over the top of other colors, and you don't see through them, so they can really define something pretty well. And you can use a lighter color like a yellow or a pink and outline a blue flower and it would look really cool. I decided to do it with black. I'm not really sure why, it just felt right at the time. But you can pick any color you'd like. And if you've got a different kind of paint marker, you'll have to experiment and see how they work. I know that Sharpie has some oil-based ones that are pretty cool. I think you'd be okay with putting the oil on top of the acrylic as long as the acrylic is completely dry. The other thing you want to be careful about is not to push down too hard because you're working on a wood surface and it's a little bit rough and it can kind of mess up the nib of your pen. I've had that happen with some of my my Posca pens and they've gotten like real rough on the end, and then you don't get a smooth line later when you go to use it on paper or something. So be kind of mindful of that and don't push down too hard. Um, so I've outlined a couple of different flower shapes, and this is pretty much abstract, so they're not going to look perfect. I'm not worried about that. I'm just having a good time, enjoying the process, and trying to create shapes that look kind of like flowers to me. Sometimes I like to add a stem to it. You might want to outline some leaves or draw some leaves onto your stem. That's cool too. Whatever you feel like doing is fine. If you've got other kind of shapes going on, like a cat shape, like my daughter would have, you might outline your cat with the Posca markers. If you've got fish, you could outline your fish. You can give them details. You might want to give them an eye or some really cool fins. Whatever it is that you see in your picture, you want to outline and kind of bring it forward. And that's one of the things I really love about this process. Painting is you can look at it for a while and just figure out, like, what do I see in this? What can I turn this into? I've already got all this paint and these colors and different shapes and layers going on, but you'll see things in it. You'll see, like, maybe the shape of a cupcake or the shape of a balloon or just something, and you can just outline it and put it in there and it'll look cool. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up a little bit again, not too much, but just enough to kind of get us moving forward. You can take as long as you need on each step, so don't feel rushed. At this point, I've got a couple of flowers drawn, and I guess I've decided I need to add a little bit more pink to something, so I'm trying to get the pink paint to come out. And I think I'm just going to paint a little bit over that one flower that's kind of up to the right, just to make it stand out a little bit more. So I've got a little pink, a little orange, and a little white that I mixed together. And I'm just going to add it in. I decided to give it an extra petal because that part was just sort of sitting out there. I added the white too because it kind of makes it more opaque and covers up what's in the background because I was painting over some dark blue. That's another thing too, like you can take, once it dries underneath, you can take a lighter color, add some white to it, or just use white and paint over the top of a darker color and it'll show up and cover it. It'll give it good coverage. And this just kind of makes the flower stand out a little bit more and maybe be slightly more defined than it was. And I just thought it would look better, so I tried it out. And I think it works. Ideally, it would probably be better to try to do like all of your painting and then all of your Posca pens, all at once. But I tend to kind of go back and forth between things as I'm working. And I think that's just part of the process since I don't have a plan in place. So here I am again. I've decided to outline some more flowers with the Posca pen. I was using the pink a few minutes ago and the paintbrush, but now I'm back with the Posca pen. So you might find that you do better just kind of sticking with one medium at a time, but I do tend to go back and forth when I'm doing this. And I think that might just be, how I work. Maybe other people work that way too. You'll have to kind of see how it works for you. So here I go again. I put my Posca pen back, capped it up. Now I've got my paintbrush out again. I'm going to do some watered down black, kind of like I did with the white earlier with the flower. I like to water the paint down because it gives it kind of a watercolor look in a way, and when you use the black watered down, the other colors underneath will sort of bleed through and it won't be quite so harsh. So I think it's really fun. And you can kind of start outlining other things or making certain things pop more and move forward for your eye by darkening up stuff around them. It's kind of fun. So I hope you'll experiment with that a little bit too and see what you like, what you don't like. You'll get a little bit of a different shade of purple or a shade of blue. You can cover up a little bit of the lines you drew with the Posca pen, the Posca pens dry really quickly so you can paint over them, which is awesome. And so sometimes I will just paint right over something a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up a little bit again because I think you get the idea. I'm just kind of going over stuff. Once I get done with putting the watered down black over spots, I'm going to move on to another color. Alright, so next I think I'm going to add a little bit more white. I kind of want to lighten up some areas. I added some water to the white so I can water it down a little bit, make it a thin glaze. And then I'm just going to go in some areas and paint over what I've already painted. So I've got these little black dots. I'm kind of going over some of them. And once the white dries, you'll still see the black coming through, but it won't be quite as dark. And I think that's going to be kind of cool. So it'll add another layer. And it also kind of helps that blue flower pop out a little bit more on that side. And just lighten up the painting overall, give it some more interest. I'm just going to speed this part up a bit again so you can follow along, but also get you on to the next step, which again, I'm going back and forth. So I grab my white Posca pen, or Posca pen, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but if you don't have paint markers, which is totally fine, you can also just get a nice fine tipped paintbrush and go in with white paint on your paintbrush and do the same kind of things that I'm doing here with the pen. I like the markers because they give me a little bit more control sometimes, and I can get really fine details like this where I'm going in and just doing really tiny white dots. But I've definitely done it with paintbrushes too. You could just get like a tiny paintbrush and just dip it in the paint and then just make tiny little dots everywhere, and it would work just as well. So don't worry about it if you can't get a hold of some paint markers. Just use what you have. Apparently I can't keep the lid on that one. It just keeps falling off. But I like to go in and do these like tiny little dots too because I feel like they add a layer of sparkle almost. And especially with flowers and these kind of designs, like floral designs, I always think about how when you're out in a garden, there's sort of like pollen floating in the air and bugs and different things that are coming out of the plants and leaving this trail of magic dust behind. So I just kind of think about that when I'm doing these things and how I want to add a little bit of that magic to the painting. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up again so you can watch me do all my dots, but a little faster because it's kind of time consuming. And I try not to place the dots too carefully. I just kind of like to pop them in real quick, not think about it too much. And you might go in too and do some other shapes because I know I did. I started making some like tiny little lines, and then I went in and started doing some more white V shapes. I did it over the top of the black ones I already had just to give them a little bit of a dimension. It makes it look like they have a shadow. So my little black V birds are now white with a dark shadow. And then since I already had some big white circles, I thought it would be good to go in and do some tiny white circles. So I'm doing that right now. Just kind of looking like what area needs a little pop of something. And you can decide for yourself, like, where do you think this white should go? Do I need a little pop of something bright in this area or that area? The white shows up really good on the dark colors, but it also looks really cool on the light colors. And then just to give it a little bit more of a floral vibe, I decided to go in and do some of these little tiny leaves with a stem, or I guess it could be a flower. These aren't really like based on anything realistic as far as flowers go. I'm just kind of making floral shapes. And I tend to like to do things in odd numbers. I don't know why, but I always kind of want to do stuff in like 3s or 5s or 7s. For some reason, that just makes me happy. But you can kind of do what you want. I'm looking at it now to see like what else I can do to tie everything together and give it like more of a cohesive look. I'm pretty happy with it right now. I think it looks pretty good. I think one of the hardest things with this kind of painting is knowing when to stop. When is this finished? I'm feeling pretty good about it right now, so I think I'm done. You will have to determine when you're done for yourself. And I hope you enjoy doing this. Here's a little bit of a close-up and then a picture of it hanging on my door. Thanks a lot. Bye.